This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Persephone and Cassandra, Atlas and Prometheus, oligarchy, plutocracy, satire, irony, hubris, nemesis, pathos, catharsis, sour grapes and blowing hot and cold, opening Pandora's box and leaving no stone unturned, the myths, tales and concepts of ancient Greece echo and reach into every aspect of modern life. Often misunderstood, frequently romanticized, and sometimes deliberately twisted. To understand their origins and truth is to get a real glimpse into the universal themes that connect us to the past and to each other. This is their story.
Άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, πάλι εγώ θα βγαίνω στην αυλή για να βλέπω τον Αλεξανδρή.
Welcome to Podyssey. I'm Alex Andreou. Each week we take one myth, one concept, person, place, theme from ancient Greece, take it apart, figure out its inner workings, trace its tentacles, juice it for wisdom, update, reconfigure, and put it back together, all shiny and new. I want to take a moment to thank you all for listening, for spreading the word, and for supporting this project. And if you don't do any of those things yet, please start. You can support the making of Season 2 of Podyssey on ko-fi.com/Podyssey for as little as a $5. An enormous amount of work goes into every episode, and if you value it, please consider funding it. I am planning lots of between-season goodies to say thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I read a piece in a well-known, very conservative publication which claimed there was now empirical evidence, undeniable data, that cinema had indeed gone woke. And the public was sick of, and I quote, heavy-handed messaging about social justice shoehorned into film. Now, ordinarily, I would ignore COD research like this, which essentially measures how many fewer straight white guys are on the screen, especially from a publication that recently accused the Pope of virtue signaling, a man whose God-mandated mission on this earth is, quite literally, to signal what constitutes virtue. But this irked me, because it is simply not true. And I realize that it is said so often that it has become almost an axiom that needs no proof. It is, in fact, gaslightingly the opposite of truth. And this episode is all about truth. The nuance and shades of grey that most modern storytelling tries to reach for is the opposite of virtue signaling. Most modern filmmakers would be ripped to shreds if they adopted the earnest preaching of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and It's a Wonderful Life, or Spartacus and To Kill a Mockingbird. Most modern audiences would feel insulted by the easy delineations of good and bad in Pride of the Yankees, The Karate Kid, or Rocky, or every 50s and 60s Western, or every 50s and 60s World War II film, not to mention explicitly religious fare like Ben-Hur, Samson and Delilah, Quo Vadis, The Robe, and the Ten Commandments. Carved in stone, I think, is about as heavy-handed as messaging gets. Now, why am I telling you this? Because the truth is, there's been a moral to the story for as long as we have had stories. The only thing that ebbs and flows is our tolerance for someone else's wisdom, for someone pointing out our shortcomings. But through that ebb and flow, one man's fables, myths we call them in Greek actually, adapt, mutate, but survive always. And he is today's topic, the eternal teacher, master of the punchy allegory. Aesop, or Aesopus, may not have invented the morality tale, but arguably he refined it to its most recognizable and purest form by making the tale part as short as humanly possible so we can get to the lesson before lights out. He created a sort of stand-up version of everyman philosophy. One storyteller to another, I have immense respect for this. I tend to go on a bit. Although I'm not sure where the commercial breaks would go if I just came on and said, a fox saw a snake sleeping under a fig tree and, envious of its length, she lay next to it and tried to stretch herself longer, but overdid it and broke into pieces. That is a genuine, canonical Aesop's fable. One sentence. But who was Aesop? And how did he get to be the one person whose books are never out of print and never out of fashion? What is it about him that means his lessons pop up throughout recorded history, still travel the world millennia later and are translated into every language and idiom imaginable? Why is he the teacher whose guidance we still seek, whose lessons we still pass on to our young, and whose censure we still accept? One house dominates the city of Cyrene on the north shore of Africa near a place that people 2.5 millennia later will know as Benghazi in Libya. It is the luxurious villa of the local slave trader. This is no coincidence. Even in the 10 years since the city was established, the Therian, for that is what he is known as, has created a burgeoning outpost for his slave business. As cities in Greece thrive, the local supply of douli, or indentured slaves, grows rare. There has not been a major war in a while, so there are fewer dhumi, or captives. Ports and ships are better defended from pirate raids. Lending is more competitive, so fewer families end up in servitude. Meanwhile, the demand for farm workers and miners, for servants, nannies, and cooks is ballooning. And so the trade expands where it must. This part of the world is good for the slavers. A few stadia inland, the earth is arid, hostile, unforgiving. One late rain, one failed crop, one sick herd can mean famine. The Therian is always there to help, in exchange for the right collateral, of course. Don't worry, he will say. You can buy back your freedom in no time. Then there are the infants. Before the Therian's arrival, an unwanted child would be left out for the gods to provide. What the gods mostly provided was death by exposure. One mouth too many to feed, or the product of an illicit relationship, or a child born different and requiring special attention. The gods really got their fill. But now the slaver gave another option, a win-win. Less work for the gods, less guilt for the parents, more inventory for the Therian, because children raised in servitude made the very best property. Several times a month, the villa would be woken up by the crying of an infant left outside. But not tonight. Not this infant. he just looks up at the giant celestial mobile above, stars rotating slowly, Selene driving her moon chariot, the odd comet, and he doesn't make a peep. Will not make a peep for 30 years, in fact. Physical obstacle or psychological block, nobody knows. "What an ugly little thing," the cook says when she finds him in the morning. "His body's all out of proportion, twisted and unpleasant. His face is like an old man's. And look how dark he is. He's like a little Aesop." That name stuck. But the trader sees potential. People built differently make for an interesting curiosity in rich households and palaces, not to mention that they feel somehow easier to treat badly. And Aesop certainly grows different. A huge head on an average torso atop two tiny legs with feet as big and flat as flippers, hunched and pot-bellied, with a face that matches his peculiar physique. He looks thrown together from spare parts, but he also grows smart and resourceful, quick to learn, responsive and strong. A good worker. Plus, a slave who cannot talk back is not a defect, but a boon. When he is old enough to be sold, he is shipped onward to Thera. From there he is bought by a Samian landowner who mishears his name as Aesop. It's not like our mute hero can correct him. He takes Aesop, as he now is called, to Samos and starts him as a field worker. He proves transformational. He trials more effective sowing techniques, improves irrigation, and crop yields rocket. His overseers, of course, take all the credit. What's he going to do? And like everyone very smart, who is also built very differently, Aesop is loathed and bullied by all around him, fellow workers and superiors, masters and other servants. One day they hatch a plan to eat a whole basket of prize figs and blame Aesop for it. Knowing he cannot possibly defend himself, they underestimate his resourcefulness. Everyone accuses him, and just as his master is about to punish him, Aesop signals, "Please wait." He brings from the kitchen a large bowl and mixes himself a cup of warm water and salt, then makes himself sick in the bowl. No figs. Seeing this, the master makes all his accusers do likewise. The true culprits are revealed in their bile, both metaphorical and literal, and are punished. Rumors of this little episode reach the goddess Isis, protector of the downtrodden, famous for her compassion and healing abilities. So she sends a priestess in disguise to investigate. Her spy approaches Aesop as he sleeps under a tree during the hottest part of the early afternoon and pretends to be lost and in distress. Aesop calms her, shares his meagre lunch with her, and, since he cannot give her direction, walks her to the nearest town, even though he will have to work well into the night to complete his duties back at the farm. The next day, as he has his little siesta at his favorite spot, Isis appears in front of him, accompanied by the 9 muses. "Look at this misshapen man, daughters," she says. "He has triumphed over every physical flaw with his piety." And she reaches into the sleeping Aesop's mouth and unties his tongue, while the muses confer on him the ability to devise and tell the most extraordinary stories. When Aesop wakes, he mutters to himself, "That was nice." It takes his still waking brain a few moments to realize what just happened. That was nice, he says again. He sits under that tree, completely still, tears running down his face. Then he starts naming everything around him like a Marvel character testing their newfound superpower. Rock, grass, mattock, sandal. Magpie, tree, cloud flower. The voiceless finally has a voice. And if the other farm workers and managers thought voiceless Aesop was a big problem, he was as nothing next to Aesop with a voice. He enjoys his voice and uses it to scorching effect. He evens up some scores. He is the Greek barbecue of wits, a squeeze of lemon and a pinch of salt on every open wound. Fable after fable turns every situation topsy-turvy in 6 devastatingly chosen sentences, or less. After a few months of this mayhem, the master agrees to sell him. He's simply causing too much trouble with all the other workers, and questioning even the authority of the overseers. "You're a slave just like me," he would say. "There are no ranks among chattels. You are like a table trying to command a chair." Aesop ends up, via a slave dealer, in the service of an intellectual and historian from the city of Samos, by the name of Xanthus, who buys him for a nominal fee, both because he is delighted by the novelty of his wit, but also, and perhaps mainly, because he intends him to be a personal slave to his wife and is looking for someone who could not possibly awaken any sexual desire. Things do not go as planned. Xanthus's delight at Aesop's wit wears off. If this were an 80s screwball comedy, the next few years would be the comic montage. Aesop uses a fable to make a fool of Xanthus at the market. Aesop uses a fable to make a fool of Xanthus to his friends. Aesop uses a fable to make a fool of Xanthus at the public bath, to his gardener, at the theatre, to his students, to his wife, at a dinner party, at another dinner party. In fact, Aesop uses a fable to make a fool of Xanthus at every dinner party. And yes, ends up using fables not only to shack up with his master's wife, but to get Xanthus to unwittingly demand that he keeps doing so. And each time he is found out, he is horsewhipped and thrown in a cell. And each time Xanthus ends up coming back to him to make nice, when he has some problem he can't solve. And each time Aesop bargains for his freedom, only for Xanthus to renege on the agreement. As days turn to seasons, and seasons turn our hero a little grey around the temples, Aesop's reputation grows, just as Xanthus's diminishes. Finally, the perfect opportunity comes along. Croesus, the king of Lydia, the most powerful force in the region, sends a letter to the Samians demanding that they submit to him and pay him tribute and taxes or face annihilation. The people gather and at a public meeting seek the advice of all the wise and learned men, all of which proves to be quite useless. So they send for Aesop. He declines, saying that for him as a slave it would be a terrible impertinence, an unforgivable offense to even seek to advise the leaders of the free men of the city. The whole of Samos demands that Xanthus make Aesop a free man, there and then publicly, and he has no choice but to comply. The voiceless, the chained, the misshapen little Aesop is finally free. He advises the Samians on a course of action that calls out Croesus's bluff in such an elegant and tricksy way, it makes the Gordian knot look like a bow.
It agrees with me. I'm absolutely free.
But celebration turns to bitterness when Croesus writes back saying he will leave Samos alone if they hand over Aesop. Adoring fandom turns mob. They drag him to the emissary, and they are about to hand him over when he stops them and tells this tale. When beasts spoke the same language as men, the wolves and the sheep went to war. The sheep had the numbers, but the wolves are all power. The sheep were heading for defeat until they made an alliance with the dogs. Together, they routed the wolves, who sent an emissary, a wolf that talked like a politician. If you surrender the dogs to us, he said, we will enter into a peace treaty. Being stupid creatures, the sheep did so, and after the wolves tore the dogs apart, it was the sheep's turn. Do not surrender a useful ally lightly. So plain, direct, and inescapable is this wisdom that it changes the citizen's mind. But when they refuse to surrender him, to everyone's amazement, even the Lydian emissaries, Aesop offers to go willingly anyway, in order to save his beloved island. All I wanted, he explains, was to make my own choice as a free man. And off he sets for Sardis, the capital of Lydia.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
When Croesus first lays eyes on him, a red mist descends. Is this the creature who stopped Croesus from conquest and glory and wealth? He growls, incredulous. It's not even a man. It is an insect, a frog, a sickly corpse, a badly made jug. Take it away and crush it. Good king, I came to you willingly, not to anger, but to advise you. Aesop replies with perfect poise. You are a man who stubs his toe and cries out not at the gravity, but at the surprise of his small injury. Examine my mind, not my appearance. A doctor feels a man's pulse before declaring him a corpse. A jug is measured by the sweetness of the wine it contains, not by its shape. And wit resides not in stature, but in words. Let me tell you a story. Croesus is stunned into silence. Proceed, he finally mutters. When beasts spoke the same language as men, our hero begins as he always liked to. One man was so hungry and so poor, he used to catch insects, drown them in brine, and eat them. As he held a little ladybird between his fingers, realizing her impending fate, she says to him, "Don't kill me out of thoughtlessness. I hurt nobody, not the grain, nor the fruit, or the flowers. I move my colorful wings in harmony and make a pleasant hum. I am a solace to all around me." So moved by her words was he, that he let her go back to her harmless busyness. I ask for the same grace. I have no power to injure, no wealth, no army. I am not handsome enough to tell lies and be believed. I just hum words of common sense. I add colour and music to the world. Croesus looks at him, spellbound, suspended in time, wide-eyed, rapt, softened, like a child. A story like this deserves more than mercy, he finally says. Ask me for anything you want. Without a moment's hesitation, Aesop's answer comes. Make peace with the Samians.
Ένα μύθο θα σας πω που τον μάθαμε παιδιά.
And so it was that the great Croesus made peace in exchange for a man's stories. The people of Samos celebrate and raise a great monument to honor this strange-looking foreign slave who saved them, on the spot where they had almost handed him over as a pharmakos, a scapegoat.
Κι από τότε στα βουνά ζούσε πια με το κυνήγι.
They call it Aesopium.
Ζούσε πια με το κυνήγι κι από
Aesop spends the next few years as Croesus' most trusted counsel while writing down his fables. When his work is done, he deposits them in the great library of Sardis and sets off to travel the world. For decades he gives lectures. Only to call them that is to insult him. He travels the world talking to people, helping them make sense of the chaos that surrounds them. He advises those who merit help and exposes those who deserve ridicule. He counsels the most powerful kings of the ancient world from the edge of the Atlantic to Babylonia, and lavishes the same solace to slaves and vagrants who cross his path, always returning to his beloved Samos to recharge and to serve. He is celebrated throughout Greece as an equal to any learned man. Only that is an insult too. He is the antithesis of a learned man's pomposity. Beetles and crows, farmers and gods, foxes and celestial bodies, all are brought to the service of his simple, inescapable folk wisdom. He can effect regime change with a tale about frogs, avert wars with a contest to make a vagrant take his coat off, teach the providence of ants and the quiet confidence of tortoises. I am not handsome enough to tell lies and be believed, he had told Croesus. Honesty and unvarnished truth are his weapons. Unfortunately, those same qualities are his undoing. When Lycurgus the Babylonian asks Aesop to settle there for his twilight years as thanks for his service, there is one more dream he must fulfill. I've never been to Delphi, he says. I have heard such wonderful things about that place. I should very much like to make that pilgrimage before I settled into retirement. Lycurgus gives him much treasure to bestow on that holy place if he finds it worthy of tribute. Unfortunately, he does not. He finds a place that is anything but holy. Tacky souvenirs litter the temples. Priests await sacrifices with sharp knives to take their cut of meat, leaving nothing for the supplicant or for the god. The Delphians are greedy, superficial, venal. The night before he starts his journey back, he tells the elders that he plans to leave no tribute. When they ask him why, he does not hold back. You are like a piece of bleached driftwood dancing on the waves, he tells them. From a great distance it appears gleaming, interesting, worthwhile. But up close it is a hollow thing of no value or significance. Just the same, now that I am here with you, I see I was mistaken. I take with me the very worst impression. The leadership is distressed, in panic. Here is Greece's sharpest tongue, about to travel the world sharing his 1-star Yelp review. This is existential. They hatch a plan and sneak a golden chalice from the Temple of Apollo into Aesop's luggage. At the city gates, he is accused and told his bags must be searched. Believing he has nothing to hide, he agrees. The trumped-up theft is discovered, and he is sentenced to death on the spot for his blasphemy, for there is no greater crime than treason or sacrilege. He will be thrown off the precipice of a ravine at the edge of the city, as the law dictates, so that his body is outside consecrated lands and never even buried with due ceremony. He protests, but the gathering mob demands vengeance. Aesop turns into a fable machine. He churns them out now as they drag him up the mountain. 1, 2, 4. When beasts spoke the same language as meant nothing. A crow was sitting on a fig tree. No good. 6 tails. 7. A farmer and his wife sat near a snake's nest. To no avail. Anger makes a crowd hear without listening. And to the elders, all his cleverness is simply confirmation of the damage he could cause if he is allowed to leave. It seals his fate. They are at the top now, on the edge. The twisted old man turns and faces them one last time before they mete out their twisted justice. His eyes shine with rage. He speaks. Since I have used all logic without convincing you, let me tell you one last story. An old farmer begged his children to let him visit the city for the first and only time before he died. But they were uncaring, ungracious, ungenerous, ungrateful. So instead of taking him or even giving him a horse, they hitched some donkeys to a wagon and told him that since they made the trip regularly, they would know the way and take him to the city. That afternoon, a storm broke out. It got dark, the donkeys got frightened and lost. The farmer is wet and cold and weak, and he feels Hades' call. He looks to the sky and he cries, "Oh, Zeus, what have I done that I should die like this? With no friends, no family, or even a horse, but only these miserable donkeys to blame." Just like that farmer, what annoys me most is that I die, not by the hand of decent beings, but a bunch of asses. And the free man known as Aesop, whose real name we will never know, and whose only driving desire was to choose his fate, turns and jumps into the void.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Aesop's life is as compelling as one of his stories. Perhaps that is why he is the only literary figure I can think of whose books, or most of them at any rate, begin with his biography. So it might surprise you to learn that 95% of what you just heard is itself a fable, a work of fiction. In fact, we are not sure that Aesop ever existed in the way we think of him today. We know that a man by that name is mentioned, that he was famous for telling stories. We have a handful of them. But we know almost nothing of his provenance, his life, his appearance, or his death. His birth is claimed by a dozen different places. Much of his biography is historically impossible. The dates just don't match up. Most scholars think that he is much like Homer, maybe a bard, the greatest representative of an oral tradition, whose name has become the umbrella term for the entire form. Certainly there is no evidence that he ever wrote down his fables. Their whole point was that they were short and easy to remember and retell. His over 700 fables, many of which can be traced back to before he is meant to have lived or after he is meant to have died. The story of the man behind the fables actually originates from several centuries later and forms what is known as the Aesop romance. An anonymous author pens a biography based on 4 or 5 snatched fragments, mentions here and there Plato, Aristophanes, Herodotus, no more than a few sentences of gossip, and constructs an entire story around it. It is known as the Vita Aesopica. Several transcripts of it exist, and are even significantly different in their biographical details to each other. Each culture appropriates him for its own purposes, and he becomes variously foreign, homegrown, Thracian, Samian, Lydian, Phrygian, African, a noble taken captive, a servant, a slave, young, old, ugly, beautiful, disabled, hunchbacked, hung like a donkey, freakishly strong, blind, a wise man of Egypt, prophet of Jehovah, black, white, even Japanese. Every so often, someone decides to rewrite his story. Someone decides to paint him as something else. They feel they can do that because Aesop belongs to everyone. He is a crowd-sourced literary celebrity. The tracing of Aesop's roots and development of his story drove me nearly mad for months. Every time I thought I got somewhere, I would find a clue that pointed in the opposite direction. And why does it matter anyway? Because we made him, which means we needed him to be this way. Not a celebrated hero or a noble king, but downtrodden, victimized, hideous in appearance. A man with no advantages, delivering his manual of how to navigate the world without judgment or superiority. A funny uncle whose wisdom does not come from books, but comes from pain. He is the lie that sustains the truth of his stories. And at a time when the distinction between fact and fiction seems more paper-thin than any in the past, the way we construct our fictions in order to support our facts, what we call a narrative, well, it matters more than anything. Aesop is fake news, but he's also woke. He's a paragon of virtue, but also propaganda. He's a social justice warrior, but he's also populism. So join me next week as I chat to the experts to begin to unravel his story, to find out how it ties into his fables, when it twists, and how, when it changes, and why.
Podyssey is an audio production by Cooler Heads, written and presented by Alex Andreou. A playlist of all the music in the episode, as well as links to the films and works of art mentioned, can be found in the show notes. Creative input, sage advice and expert contributions by the 4 best muses a man could ask for: Alexandra Angeletaki-Røe, Debbie Challis, Linda Marric, and Dr. Ruth Smith. Executive producers Naomi Smith and Kenny Campbell. Music by Marianna Sangita. Artwork by Simona Kanellou. Alex Andreou's Podyssey is a collaboration with Sandstone Global.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.